Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm joined by the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hirsch, as well as the Agri-News Director for 620 CKRM Regina, Ryan Young. I'm Doug Falconer, the Agriculture Director at GX94 in Yorkton, and a number of topics to discuss this week, gentlemen. First of all, coming out on Sunday, we heard Canada and Manitoba announce more funding to improve rail and port facilities that head to Churchill, Manitoba. Kevin, what's your take on that? Is it worth the funding?
Well, they don't seem to talk a lot about grain, or not nearly about as much about grain as they do about everything from potash to uh, rare earth minerals to other things. They do say, oh, that terminal is ready to go. Well, that terminal hasn't moved any grain in 5 years. I I still am dubious that it's going to find its place as a major grain export port. I hope they prove me wrong. They seem to think that the seasons are getting longer and longer, where you could get ships in and out without the use of icebreakers, and they attribute that to climate change. But still, even 6 months of operation is still not that handy for an export port. I wish them all the best, but I think there's a number of reasons why the port might be useful for a number of commodities. I'm just not sure that it's ever going to be a significant grain export port.
All right. And then, of course, Ryan, you did a story this week about the AgTech Accelerator Program, and they're taking applications now.
Yeah, they're taking applications in from now until January 9th of 2026. Uh, any ag tech startup company that's interested in applying to take part in the program, they can go to the cultivator.ca website and they can follow all the prompts and instructions there on how to fill it out. But from what I understand, it's a very beneficial program. This AgTech Accelerator takes up any ag startup company that's looking to boost their brand or learn some tricks of the trade and have an opportunity to get out in front of investors and the public and the farming community to show their brand, what they're all about, and what they offer to the ag community. And there's been about 62 ag startup companies that have participated in the program since inception. And if you look at the numbers on their website, it's quite a bit, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue generated, millions of dollars in public funding and private capital investment made towards these companies, creating hundreds of new jobs. So numbers seem to indicate that there's a lot of upside and a lot of benefit to participating in this program. There's about 10 companies that participate each year, five from Canada and five from the United Kingdom. So when I was talking to Laura Mock, who's the director of the program, she said that the definition of success is different for each company, but again, with the numbers provided, everybody seems to have, kind of a positive story afterward once they participate in the program. So, yeah, good news all around.
Kevin, I am sure that you think the AgTech Accelerator Program is a great idea.
Yeah, it's innovation is really our future, and a lot of the companies need that startup funding or that bridge funding to get where they're going. And you have to realize too that there's going to be successes and there's going to be failures. If you're not trying, if you're not failing, sometimes you're not trying hard enough. And for an individual investor to put money in to just one of these, that can be a worrisome thing because you might not have picked a winner. But if investors can look at companies that have been properly vetted, maybe even spread investments over a number of positive looking companies, then we've got something that's likely to work. But important to have that startup and bridge funding to keep innovation happening, especially in agriculture.
Something else that happened this week was Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe went to Washington to have some trade discussions with some officials there. Ryan, I know you had a chance to listen in on that news conference in Regina once Premier Moe returned.
That's right. Yeah. He was in Washington from Monday until Wednesday. He was meeting with some members of the Trump administration's cabinet, Jameson Greer being one of them, Howard Lutnick being another individual that he met with in separate meetings, as well as a number of other U.S. representatives. And overall, from what Mo was saying, it was kind of clear on both sides that there needs to be a tariff-free trade environment. Of course, we're still dealing with various U.S. tariffs of varying degrees on various Canadian products, and depending on the mood of the president, that could change any minute or any day or any month, or they could last for a little while longer. But it seems like from the American cabinet's perspective, there's an understanding that these tariffs need to be removed. And from Mo's perspective, this was also kind of a chance to kind of move forward on some of the trade talks uh, between the U.S. and the Canadian government as well, just try to push that forward. We know that talks kind of stalled earlier in the year when the Ontario government had their ad campaign run in the U.S. about how tariffs are bad and using some excerpts from Ronald Reagan's speech back in '87. And Trump obviously not liking that at all. So that led to the decision to cut off all trade talks. So the hope is, with Mo going down there, that those talks resume, and only time will tell rather if that's going to happen. So here's fingers crossed and hoping.
Kevin, what was your reaction to that news? Obviously, any talking is good talking.
Yeah, got to keep making overtures, and certainly Scott Moe's approach is much more likely to have some results than what Doug Ford's actions resulted in. Is going to be a long path, and CUSMA negotiations between the three nations is not far away on the horizon. So even though we've got some immediate trade issues, maybe not affecting Saskatchewan as much as some other parts of the country, but beyond that, the CUSMA negotiations are in the offing, and we have to start laying a groundwork for fruitful negotiations and hopefully come out of that with something that's long lasting and workable.
Another piece of news that came up this week was foreign farmland ownership came up in the Saskatchewan legislature with the opposition NDP questioning the Saskatchewan party government on what's being done about any possible infractions. And Ryan, you had a chance to listen to that audio through question period.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's kind of the same thing at last report. The NDP again raising the same issue rather, and asking the same questions of what is the government doing to really clamp down on the issue of foreign ownership of farmland in the province. And the government's response has been since the outset, if there's any evidence of foreign ownership of farmland or anything egregious, that it should be sent to the Farmland Security Board for investigation. Now, the government has made some amendments to legislation to give the Farmland Security Board some more clarification on when they can issue fines and enforce the law if there's any contravention of the act. Some clearer situations. They also amended the act to uh, remove the exemption for the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board to own any farmland in the province. The board hasn't owned any farmland, I believe, in the last decade or so. So, really a non-issue there. But again, foreign ownership of farmland, you always hear about it in some agricultural circles. Some are convinced, some are not. So, again, it's just the issue raised again, but really nothing concrete moving forward here.
Kevin, would you also say this is much ado about nothing?
Well, I think it's an issue that really does concern the farming population. And I think in addition to more strength and more resources for the Farmland Security Board, it would be great if there was more transparency. Ken McDonald used to be head of the Farmland Security Board. Now he's leading an advisory committee looking at some of the rules and regulations. But do you know who the current chair or the current members of the Farmland Security Board are? Do you know when they meet? Do you know what decisions they're rendering? I think there's room for a whole lot more transparency and understanding on this issue, because up until now they've operated more in the background, and if you ever really want to talk to Farmland Security Board, you're left talking to a bureaucrat, not talking to the chair of the committee. So they've been shielded and not as transparent as they need to be to alleviate the concerns that and to make sure that yes, they are actually doing their job. And if there's limitations to what they can do, and understanding whether there's money behind somebody that's buying farmland, foreign money behind somebody, how can they determine that? Are there steps that they can go to make sure that this is a free and clear Canadian citizen owning farmland? So I think there's a number of things that can be done, and I think it would behoove the government to actually address them, even though there doesn't seem to be cases that people can point at definitively that are cases that are breaking the law.
And Kevin, you provided us with a couple of stories this week as well. The first one was regarding some good news in the agriculture industry. For instance, fertilizer prices dropping a bit.
Yes, specifically on urea, where and it's it's a bit of a glimmer of good news. It's not a huge wholesale drop. Urea prices are still higher than they were last year at this time, and still quite expensive. But for much of the summer, they were kicking around $850 a ton. And now, last I saw, they were under $800 a ton, and some producers were considering that a buying opportunity. But various opinions out there as to whether we're going to continue to see urea prices come down a little bit, or whether we're actually going to see a next leg up in urea prices. But right now we've got a little cheaper than we did have before. Unfortunately, some other fertilizers, specifically phosphate, is still very expensive in that $1,300 a ton range, and that hasn't changed very much. But these things, they can change quite quickly from one week to the next, and we really don't have a good reporting system on retail fertilizer prices on an ongoing basis. You have to sort of phone around to all of the potential suppliers to track this. I wish we had a system which would more closely track what's happening with farm input prices, specifically fertilizer.
And Kevin, you also worked on a story considering canola. And even though there are tariffs for canola seed, oil, and meal heading into China, you're suggesting that canola still is doing fairly well price-wise?
When I look at numbers for next year and do partial budgets and try to understand potential returns and costs, and assuming what you see for canola prices now or what we might get for the year ahead, canola still comes out very favorably. And canola prices are similar to what they would have been a year ago at this time, whereas many commodities are considerably lower, especially lentils and peas and durum wheat. So even though you would think that with the tariff situation in China that's received so much attention, that producers would be more inclined to decrease canola acres in 2026, I think the economics is pointing the other way. And my early prediction would be that canola acres will be similar and maybe higher in 2026.
We also had news this week that an advisory firm in Ontario said that they're working on the fact that they want to change some rules in the Income Tax Act when it comes to farm succession. Right now, there is a tax deferral for a farmer who passes on his land to a child, but they would like it to apply to nieces and nephews too, in case there isn't a child who wants to farm. What are your thoughts on that initiative?
Well, I think that's something that really should be looked at, and something that we probably haven't thought about. But oftentimes you'll see, for instance, two brothers farming together, and then their kids get involved, but some of the kids on one side or the other don't want to continue. The uncle would be glad to leave farmland or roll farmland over under existing tax rules to a niece or nephew, but is not able to do so. It has to be a direct descendant. And it's something that I don't remember ever being brought up before, but it would seem like an excellent idea if we want to maintain family farm ownership.
Yeah, they were saying back in the day that, of course, there were generally large farm families, so there was a pretty good chance that at least one child would want to continue farming. But now families a lot smaller, and if you have two kids and neither one of them wants to farm, you're in a bit of a pickle.
That's right, and you might be very pleased to be able to, roll it over to a niece or nephew on a tax deferred basis. It would seem to make great sense. I'm surprised that we haven't really discussed or nobody has brought this idea forward before.
We also had word on Friday that on Thursday, Ag in Motion, the big farm show out by Saskatoon at the Langham, Saskatchewan site, has won a National Tourism Award for the way they're able to pull in people from across the prairies and really from across the country and even parts of the U.S. What's your response to learning that news, Kevin?
I think that's marvelous, and you guys spend even more time at Ag in Motion than I do. But it's been a huge success. It grows bigger and more popular, has a wider reach each year than the previous year, and the economic spin-off to the area and to the province must be huge. So I know we've talked about economic spin-offs on things like Canadian Western Agribition, and that is very big. But I think Ag in Motion has the potential to be even larger in many respects when you see the land base they have and the number of exhibitors and the number of companies involved.
All right. And finally, of course, next week is Canadian Western Agribition. And Ryan, you're going to be front and center there, of course, working at CKRM in Regina. You're going to be there every day. That's going to keep you pretty busy. What are you looking forward to next week?
Well, there's a ton to look forward to. It just kind of depends on your preference. One thing that I'm particularly looking forward to is Bison Day on Tuesday. Now, bison is kind of a smaller, I'd say, more niche market compared to the beef cattle counterparts and the other livestock in Canada. But bison, don't sleep on bison meat, especially. It's really good meat. I know they provide samples as well at Agribition, so also looking forward to that. Where we're set up, we're close to the Saskatchewan Cattle Association area where they cook up different samples and share recipes for inspiration for anybody to check out. So I'm looking forward to that the most. I'm also looking forward to the Maple Leaf Finals Rodeo as well. It was great seeing it last year. It was great crowds, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Agribition has to offer this year. I'm going to have a little bit of help this year. We're going to have some reporters from Sask Today help me out with covering some of the other events and happenings going on in Agribition, and you'll hear all about it on Sask Ag Today. So looking forward to it.
And Kevin, I know Agribition has an interest for you as well.
Yeah, I won't be attending, so Ryan, you make sure you pace yourself because you can run yourself ragged trying to be all the different locations there. But certainly a great event. It's really where city meets country because it's not like a show like Ag in Motion or the crop production show that's aimed at producers, and almost every booth is aimed at selling something or providing a service to producers. Agribition is really aimed at the general public with the education component and certainly a very large entertainment component, but also good for some of the smaller agricultural commodities, sheep, goats, llamas, draft horses, things that don't get as much attention on a regular basis. And of course, still the basis is a huge purebred cattle show that sometimes I think almost gets ignored with all the other things going on at Agribition.
Excellent. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of CKRM Regina Agri-News Director Ryan Young and the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hirsch, I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Falconer, saying so long until next time